Hi and welcome to my channel. I've made this channel for one reason really, and that's to try to help any victims out there of cluster B personality disorders. Obviously my angle of this, being a male, is going to be looking predominantly at male victims, but I think any female victims of male cluster Bs will find the information on this channel hopefully to apply to themselves as well. I'm not scripting any of this, it's just pretty much going to be me free-flowing whatever comes into my head at the time. There's a few channels that I just wanted to give a shout out to before I begin. One would be the old Masses versus Classes channel, which is now renamed Brother John. Another one is Spartan Life Coach. Third one is Trenton Hawley, and the fourth one would be Robert Wong. I'll link all of these channels in the description because I think that all of them contain extremely useful information for anybody who's been a victim of cluster B personality disordered women or men. Okay, so really what I wanted to do first of all is to kind of just give an introduction to me and explain sort of my angle and my view on what seems to be becoming a much more serious issue or much more prevalent issue. So I'm not going to give my name or anything like that purely because it's just a privacy issue for me. I don't really want friends or family seeing any of this information or colleagues or anything like that, at least not this time. That's just a personal choice. I feel like the information should hopefully still be valid and interesting. So just a personal thing there. You won't be seeing my face or hearing my name or anything like that, but I'm just going to give my story. That's all this is about. Obviously, I'm not a professional, and my views on this most likely will be biased. I'm not trying to present facts here. I'm just giving my side of things and how I feel about the whole thing. So, if anyone wants to refute anything that I've said, they're more than welcome to in the comments. But this is just one guy's opinion on a topic. So, yeah, basically to start this video off and start this channel off, a little bit about me. So, I'm a guy in my mid-20s. I've been involved with at least 2 cluster B personality disordered women, one being a borderline, 2, the second one, which was actually the first one I was involved with, I would lean more towards NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, although she certainly had some borderline traits. I couldn't be sure on the first one because at the time I was involved with her, I didn't have the knowledge that I had now. I didn't even know what a personality disorder was. I didn't really even know that there was something wrong with this woman. All I know was that she was a whirlwind that came into my life and pretty much destroyed my life and then left. I put the pieces back together, and it wasn't until a couple of years later when I met somebody with borderline personality disorder, and I started to look into the subject a little bit more, and I stumbled across all this information on personality disorders that I put it together that the first one was a major problem. So what I'm going to do is just tell you basically the story of my first encounter with a cluster B disordered woman and what it led to. So pretty much I was a young guy when I met her. I was in my very early 20s, and she was also around that same age. I moved into a flat because I just started university, so I moved to a new town, new university, didn't know anybody there, and the flat that I moved into, the living arrangements were there was a couple that lived there, a young couple, and another single guy. So I move into this flat, and, you know, at this point in my life, I was pretty happy. You know, I was excited to be starting university. I'd actually moved countries pretty recently, so, you know, I didn't have a social network at all. It was just me on my own, but I was starting out, and I was, you know, looking forward to university, meeting new people, making friends. So I move into this flat, and pretty quickly on, me and the girl from the couple sort of, you know, struck up a little bit of a friendship, basically. It was a case of her boyfriend was in full-time employment at this point, as was the other guy that lived in the flat, and we were both uni students, so we had a lot of spare time, I guess, where we would be in the flat, and, you know, we'd just be talking and having a laugh, watching TV or whatnot. Nothing untoward. Everything was pretty much perfectly normal. She was a lot of fun, and we got on very, very well. After maybe a month of living there, she asked me one night if I wanted to go with her to have dinner at one of her friends' houses, because she'd agreed to drive over and have dinner, and her boyfriend didn't want to go or whatnot, so she asked if I wanted to go, and I'd already met this friend of hers, and she'd actually kind of talked about setting me up with her, although I wasn't actually interested in this other girl at all. But, you know, I wasn't doing anything that night, and so I was like, yeah, sure, we'll go. So we went, had dinner, it was fun, everything was fine. And I remember when we were driving home in the car, we got onto the subject of, you know, what do you think of my friend? And I was like, oh, you know, she's nice, but I wouldn't be interested in her in that way. And she goes to me, oh, okay. She's like, what would you rate her out of 10? I think I said something like a 6 or something like that. And then she looks over to me and she goes, what would you rate me? And I kind of just laughed it off. I think I said something like an 8 maybe. Didn't think that much of it. And I just jokingly, I said back to her, I was like, what would you rate me? And she didn't want to answer it. And then she goes, well, let's just say this. My boyfriend's going on holiday in a week, and he's nervous about leaving me in the flat with you. So I was like, oh, okay. This was kind of the first time that anything like this had been hinted at all, you know, and I really didn't think that much of it. I kind of just laughed it off, really. But anyway, we carried on talking in the car, and, you know, it come to the root of it where she was saying that all of a sudden she was so unhappy with her boyfriend, and, you know, she was terribly depressed about it, and the relationship wasn't going well. It hadn't been going well for months. Yeah, and we ended up having this long conversation. Anyway, we pulled back to the flat, and it was probably about midnight or something like that, and she wanted to carry on talking, so I remember we were at the end of the driveway sitting on the curb talking for, would have been about 2 hours, and, you know, she's kind of just laying this whole story on me of how her boyfriend was just so uncaring, and he didn't treat her well. His friends and family were nasty to her, and he never stood up for her. All this stuff. And to me, at this point, I've got to stress, at this point, because it certainly would change later down the line, I couldn't understand how this poor girl could be treated so bad. You know, I was like, she's a good-looking girl, she's kind-hearted, or seemed that way, you know, she's funny, she's cool, she was a great girl, and, you know, I was completely unprepared for anything like this. I never, I didn't have that much experience really with this kind of thing. I'd had relationships before, don't get me wrong, but they'd always been pretty straightforward. And all of a sudden, I'm sat counselling this girl, and I just did what I thought the best thing to do would be, and I just told her, look, you talk to him, communicate, tell him how you feel, and that kind of thing. And went to bed and kind of forgot all about it. And then, so a week later, the guy goes on holiday. Or, no, it was a work trip, sorry. So he went on this work trip, and it was overseas. He was going to be gone for 2 weeks. And the first night he was gone, the girl who I lived with, she invited the friend over, the friend that we'd previously hung out with for drinks. And her friend, I guess, had a bit of a crush on me, but it wasn't reciprocated by me, and I was doing my very best not to give off any wrong signals or anything like that, because that's just kind of sort of person I am. Is like, I don't want to upset someone or something like that. And I was flattered that this girl liked me, but I wasn't interested, and I just didn't want to give off the wrong idea. So I was trying to just keep it on a pure friends level. Well, they both got like a little bit drunk, and all of a sudden, the girl that I lived with started to make some pretty inappropriate remarks, considering she was in a relationship, about me. And she started hinting at things, and, her friend kind of at one point got a bit upset, I think, and she pulled her outside and was like, look, what's going on here? And the girl that I lived with, she told her off, basically. This friend of hers was completely dominated by her, and so she pretty much told her to shut up, and how dare she accuse her of this, that, and the other. So that was a little bit awkward. But anyway, the night continued, and we ended up going to town, came home, and the girl that I lived with suddenly, she wanted to talk to me. So I was like, okay. So she invited me into her bedroom to talk, because it would be quiet in there. And we went in there, and all of a sudden she just drops it on me. And she says, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, I think I've fallen in love with you. Now, I was just young and naive at this point, and I didn't have a damn clue what red flags were or anything of this whole business, I'm just like, wow, just shocked, really, and so I was like, well, what, but you've got a boyfriend. And she's like, yeah, I know, but I'm not happy with him. You're so much nicer than he is. You take care of me. And she alluded to being more physically attracted to me, etc., etc. And my whole point on it was, well, look, you've got a boyfriend. If things there don't work out, then maybe we could talk about this. But for right now, it's a no-go, And she agreed. And she said she was going to try and sort things out with him. Well, okay, that's kind of fine. Well, a couple of days later, I'd got home from uni first, and there was no one home. So I was laying on the sofa watching TV, and this girl comes home. At this point, I just want to state something, which is that I don't proclaim to be a completely innocent victim here. I certainly had my own part to play in all of this, but the thing is, I've always been willing to hold my hands up and to, I guess you'd say, I was willing to take the consequences of my actions. Not everything that I did was perhaps morally 100% correct, and certainly some of what I did was wrong, but I would always just hold my hands up to that. So, this isn't a tale of me complaining about what happened to me or pretending to be an innocent victim in all of this. It's just me relaying what happened to me, and think of it what you will. But anyway, so there I was laying on the sofa, and she walked in and put her bag down, took her coat off, and she came and laid, pretty much spooned into me, grabbed my hand, and I don't need to go into graphic detail, but obviously the dynamic at that point changed. And, my attitude on it at that point was, I was still detached enough emotionally that it wasn't playing on my mind all of the time or anything like that, but I was sort of starting to think, this is an odd situation, and it escalated over the course of that 2 weeks while her boyfriend was away. And, it got to the point where it was like, well, he's coming back in a couple of days now. What's going on here? And she basically put it to me that she was going to finish with him when he got back. She was basically going to pick him up from the airport, and they were going to kind of stop on the drive home, and she was going to talk to him and tell him that, she wanted to break up and kind of go from there. And then obviously we would discuss what was going on between us and sort it out. So I'm like, okay. So she goes to pick him up, comes home, and I wouldn't say that everything between them was normal, but it certainly wasn't apparent that their relationship was over. So we're in a really awkward kind of situation now where the three of us are living in this flat, but she's still technically his boyfriend, but yet she's carrying on with me. And the amazing thing about this is that she wasn't exactly secretive. I mean, it was never stated what was going on, but it was obvious. The other guy that lived in the flat certainly picked up on something, and, some of their friends used to come over for parties and things like that, and I was always getting hit up as to what's the story with you and her. And I'm just like, well, we're just friends, and I'm getting looks like, yeah, right, kind of thing. And it was just a bizarre situation. So, for the next couple of weeks, she used to stay up late with me every night till about 2, 3 in the morning. Well, he'd go to sleep at like 10 o'clock because he had to be up for work. So she'd stay up with me till like 2, 3 in the morning, then go jump in bed next to him and go to sleep. And I'm sort of scratching my head as to what the hell is going on, but I spoke to some of my friends about it, and the advice they gave me was, well, just give her time and things like that. And this was the problem that started to happen, was as soon as I got emotionally invested, as soon as she detected that, the game started to change. And it was slow, but slowly but surely, the sweet, innocent, poor, downtrodden girl who I'd met started to become, the exact thing that she told me that everyone had accused her of being. Cold, callous, manipulating, lying, cruel, jealous, insecure, all of that started to come out. And it was slow enough that it was almost not noticeable at first, but certainly if you took the girl that I first met and compared her to the one that I saw the last time we had any kind of contact, they were completely different people. So anyway, yeah, so, carrying on this story. So I'm living in this flat, and at this point it is starting to play on my mind a lot. It's distracting me from my studies. It's kind of preventing me from moving forward in my social life, because slowly but surely she started to get more and more possessive of me, and it was to the point where she'd know my uni schedule, and if I finished at 3 and I wasn't home at 3:30, I'd be getting text messages saying, "Where are you? Don't you want to spend time with me? Don't you care about me?" etc., etc. It was all about her, and anytime I'd kind of bring up my needs or what was going on with me, it was just written off, It would be a case of she's telling me how much she loves me and how much she wants to be with me and how I'm this and I'm that. And I'd say to her, "Well, what's going on with your boyfriend?" And I'd kind of get attacked. Like, "Oh, you don't understand. This is hard for me. Why are you trying to make it harder?" And I'd get the kind of emotional manipulation, either crying or all this kind of thing, which would kind of put me off asking what was really going on. And then I started to witness, basically, she devalued her boyfriend in front of me. And I saw it all, and it was rather a shocking thing to witness, really, because the way she treated him, I mean, I'd never really seen anything like that. She kicked him out of the bedroom and made him sleep in the lounge, for a period of 2 months. She went into their room and they had a big photo wall of pictures of him and her together, and she kind of cut out all of the pictures of him and threw them at him. She's just rude to him, obnoxious, flirting with me in front of him. And, this guy, he just took it all. He just took it. But at the same time, she'd say to me, he doesn't care about me and he's not fighting for our relationship. His parents hate me and he needs to tell them to get lost and he needs to pick me over them. And so she's telling me this, but then in the next breath, she's telling me how much she loves me and, how much she loves me. Sorry if this is cutting out. It's just that where I live, I don't exactly have much privacy, so I have to pause every now and then. So she's kind of telling me this. So I've kind of got this constant struggle going on in my own brain, because on the one hand, I know that this situation's wrong, but at this point, I did really care about this girl, and I had fallen for her, and she was giving me kind of enough to keep me hanging on, and at the same time, her relationship did seem to be breaking down. But my whole thing on it always was, if what you're saying is true, why aren't you just breaking up with him? And there was always an excuse, there was always a reason why she couldn't, whether it be his nan's just died, so he's depressed, or whether it came down to money. Like I say, the red flags here were just blowing up in my face, but I couldn't recognise them, and if I did recognise them, I pretty much just wrote them off. Because when things were good, they were really good. And that was kind of enough to keep me involved in this. But pretty much the story goes on, and I could talk all day about this subject because it went on for about 7 or 8 months. I know that just sounds absolutely ridiculous, but we went through various phases in that time of like, let's kind of just forget about this, and, you know, or I'd be thinking of moving out, but somehow the whole thing, it just kept on going. And during this time, she fell out with that friend of hers who she'd originally been trying to set me up with, and I don't talk to that girl anymore, really, but if I did, you know, I could do if I wanted to, and for a while after all of this, we did become quite good friends, but it wasn't really sustainable because, you know, she obviously still had feelings for me, so it just was not a healthy situation for either of us, really, and we kind of just drifted apart. But anyway, you know, her friend would talk to me now and then, and she would tell me things like, she's done this before, you know, you don't know what she's like, etc. Now, I ignored all of this, but some very bad things happened during that whole period of time. I mean, her boyfriend's dad tried to come round to the flat, and she kind of, you know, got him to stop coming round, and she cut him off from his family. She then later on tried to kind of pull the same stunt on me. It was very much she wanted me and him isolated from anyone around us that would try to talk sense into us, I guess. And, you know, somehow she turned into the prize between me and him, and I don't know how it happened, because when I first moved into that flat, I didn't look at her twice. But, you know, she played into my my own issues, I guess, as being a codependent and having, you know, a weakness to girls that are depressed and sad and need help. She played into that perfectly, and she got me to fall for her. And like I say, so here I was in this kind of madhouse environment where I could just not get a minute's peace. I didn't have any time to actually think and pull myself together and think, you need to get out of this. And, you know, so that the situation went on and on and on, and just got progressively worse. And over time, I sort of started to become on the receiving end of these rages that she had, and, you know, just various sort of verbal abuse. You know, we had some real tear-ups verbally, because the one thing I wasn't ever going to do was become like her boyfriend was, which was just completely and utterly subservient. You know, I did fight back, and we had some massive, massive rows and everything under the sun, but it always seemed to be that we'd make it up. But yeah, so this situation went on, and then the funniest part of it all is that after a good 8 months, and there would have been, you know, several months where her boyfriend had been couched, and he knew something was going on. He knew she'd been playing around on the side, definitely knew, and knew it was with me. He never did anything about any of it. And, you know, it got to the point where it was just about, actually, he was getting kind of ready to leave. And at this time, I didn't really read into all of this stuff as close as I can now. Now I can see exactly what happened, but at the time, this just came as a massive shock. So, obviously, I was a uni student, and I didn't have much money, and this guy was a civil engineer and was, you know, considerably better off than I was at that point in my life. And it got to a point where he was going to leave. And all of a sudden, when this became apparent, out of nowhere, when everything between me and her had been seemingly fine, and she hadn't really spoken to him even in a couple of weeks, and she fabricated a reason for me and her to have an argument. And that was it. That was the end for us, out of nowhere. I suddenly became just hated, blamed for everything that had gone wrong. She went around telling people that I was a liar. yeah, and that night that we had that argument, she was back in bed with him, and they were back on. He never asked any questions. He just took her back, and I left. I ended up leaving, and I moved out, and it was all pretty quick. And I just remember I moved into a new place, and I just was sitting there on my bed in this new house, thinking, what the hell just happened? Like, the last sort of 6 months were just a blur, and it was like coming out of, they call it now out of the fog, but at the time I didn't know what to call it. It was just a blur of just emotional, just explosions, and never being comfortable, never knowing from 1 minute to the next where I stood, what was going on, what was happening. I was just on eggshells all the time. I was nervous. I was always just had these thoughts in my head. And then it just ended over absolutely nothing. And I'm sitting there in this new place, and I'm thinking all I wanted was for the fucking phone to ring and for it to be her and say we could sort this out. And I'm just thinking about wanting her back. And I look back on it now, and it's like, my word. I mean, I did end up speaking to her a couple of times after that. And I think, she re-established contact under the guise of maybe we could be friends and things like that. But the real reason she was contacting me was because there was a lot of talk going on around her. And I think she just wanted to be in my good books so that I wouldn't open my mouth to anyone about what had really gone on. It was like, well, we're on good terms, don't listen to what anyone says, and it was that kind of thing. She had no interest in anything other than that. It was all just lies and a means to an end. And I never really got to grips with it all. I never knew what had really gone on. I just came out of it in a depression and thinking that there must be something wrong with me, that I failed somehow. And I had all these false belief systems going on in my head at the time, that she was the love of my life and I blew it somehow, and we were going to be together, and I wasn't patient enough. And, looking back, I know all that was absolute nonsense, and I know exactly what she was. She's just devious, manipulative liar. She used to do things like, when my exams were coming up, she would suddenly, the morning of one of my exams, she'd say to me, my boyfriend, the boyfriend who'd been on the couch for 4 months at this point while she'd been, with me, he told me that he's going to buy me an engagement ring. She'd just tell me that 30 minutes before I went into one of my exams. And I literally went into that exam, and it was a 2 hour or maybe 2.5 hour exam, and it was like, you weren't allowed to leave until an hour, and the second that clock hit the hour, I was out of there. Amazingly, I passed that exam, but I don't know how. But yeah, I scribbled down what I could, and I got out of there the second I could, to go home and sort this situation out, talk about it. What's going on? Why would you be thinking about marrying this guy that for the last 4 months you've been telling me that you hate, and that he's abusive and he's neglectful and he's this and he's that? It's all just mind games, gaslighting and all that, And anyway, she ended up screwing him over in the end anyway, for someone else who, as far as I could detect at the time, was just a guy who had more money. So she met a guy with more money, and he did his job of keeping the bed warm for about 4 months, and then she just monkey branched straight over to this guy, and the whole time it was all about that with her. But my whole thing on it the entire time we were going was just like, look, if you don't want to be with me, and this isn't going anywhere, just tell me, just be honest with me. and we could be friends or whatever, but it was always, no, that's not what it is. I do want to be with you. I love you. Just dangling on, and it's a really, it's horrible looking back at it, because I'm so removed from it nowadays that I almost don't see that period of my life as actually being me. It's like looking at someone else going through it, and it's like, man, I feel bad for that guy, and I feel terribly bad for her boyfriend, terribly bad. At the time I didn't, because he was painted to me as just being evil, really, but even then I guess I could see that it wasn't what she was painting him as. But nowadays I certainly look back at that guy as being just a hopeless codependent who'd been broken down by his mother as a child, because his mother certainly was very similar to his girlfriend, and on a certain level, my mother was very similar to her. Maybe not quite as bad, and I think that was the only reason why I had a little bit more ability to stand up for myself. But certainly, yeah, his mother had broken him, and then he had the misfortune of getting involved with her. And yeah, I hear through the grapevine about that guy every now and then, and from what I know, he's been single ever since, which would be about 3 years. And I wouldn't be shocked if he just ain't interested in women anymore, because certainly for me, after I came out of that situation, it took me a good 2 years before I was in a state where I was open to meeting someone. And that will be a story for another day, because I did end up meeting someone, and she ended up being a diagnosed borderline. But that was unbeknownst to me at that time. But as I say, that's a story for another day. This is just, the tale of me and where I came from. So, that was my first run-in with a cluster B, and it ruined my life to the point of I left uni, because I left before I even got my exam results, because I was just 100% sure that I would have failed everything, because I was under so much stress. I was going to the university counsellor. I was depressed. I was badly underweight and malnourished, because of the money that I did get, I was sort of having to spend it taking her out, and I didn't have a lot, so I didn't really eat. I didn't sleep. I was just in a bad state, bad state, and it took me probably a year to just get myself sort of right again, and then another year after that to really kind of come somewhat back to normal. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't really recover from that until very recently, when I found out about all this cluster B stuff, and it kind of explained to me what really happened, and I could finally, like I say, I don't paint myself as being completely innocent, but I could somewhat stop blaming myself at that point and be like, yeah, I did make some mistakes, but at the end of the day, I was just stupid. I just walked into a very dangerous person. But there you go. So yeah, there's my story. There will be more, because I do want to talk about what I've learned from that, and as we go down the line, I may discuss the more recent one. But right now, that is still rather fresh, so I may or may not discuss that. But I think we've got enough to go on with this first case. So I hope that wasn't too boring, and I hope that maybe, gives you some kind of understanding of me and what I've been through. So good luck, and I'll make another video soon. Thank you.